Today in studio with me I have Gareth and Hannah, and we are going to talk about mistakes that one should avoid making when drafting a will, which could perhaps lead to the will being invalid or the will not being able to be implemented correctly. So Gareth, obviously using clear language is really important. What happens in the case where we don't use clear language and it creates confusion? What could happen potentially?
So your will does need to be clear and have no ambiguity to it. If there is a circumstance that does happen, usually it would lead to delays in winding up the estate, possibly even legal proceedings. Maybe we need to get opinions on what we thought the intention was, and also to make sure that we use very clear language. So another sort of very practical example is if you sort of draft your will and you name, let's say, your son as your sole beneficiary, but later on in the will, maybe you make a bequest to your brother of a cash amount. Now there's uncertainty because you've named one as the sole beneficiary of your estate, and now all of a sudden you're nominating another beneficiary. Exactly. So complications in that instance can arise through sort of not just thinking clearly and being direct in terms of your intentions.
Yeah, so it's in the detail.
Absolutely.
So Hannah, another error that people make is they don't comply with the criteria for having their will attested by competent witnesses. What does that mean? What is a competent witness?
A witness needs to be of the age of 14 years old. They need to not be mentioned in the will. So if a witness witnesses your will and they mentioned in the will, whether it be the beneficiary, the trustee, the guardian, it might not make the will invalid as such, but it might exclude them from inheriting from the will. So if you've named your child as the beneficiary in your will and you ask them to just witness your will for you, it might exclude them from actually benefiting from your will, which is a problem.
And while we're on that topic of validity, while it's not a legal requirement that your will is dated, it's advisable that it is. What are the implications of not having a dated will?
You don't need to date your will, as you mentioned, but when you have many wills or you redraft your wills over the years, because you don't always have one will in place and leave it. As things change, you update it. It's easier for them to see which will was drafted latest and which will would apply in the event of your passing. So it's advisable to date it.
So talking about having multiple wills, another problem that arises is where people don't revoke their previous wills. Can you maybe chat about that, Gareth?
I think further to Hannah's point, by not dating it, we don't know which is the most recent will, which is the will that we're meant to act on. So it's always a good idea to open your will with a revocation clause. That'll simply state that this will that you're signing on that day is your last will and testament, and basically revokes any previous wills, but importantly any other codicils or testamentary bequests that you might have made previously. Again, you want to be clear, so you don't want to be in a situation where you have a revocation clause, but maybe it only mentions the previous wills, and in a previous will you had a codicil to that will. Now the executor is sitting with a will that's got a recent date and an older codicil, can create confusion, ambiguity, delays, potential legal cost proceedings. So again, you want to just be very clear and concise with your wills.
And on that note, another word of caution is if somebody has got a foreign will in place, you want to be sure that that revocation clause isn't interpreted that it now revokes your foreign will. So you need to be quite specific that you are revoking your previous South African wills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Hannah, it seems obvious that one needs to name one's beneficiaries in one's will, but why is it so important?
It's important because some people might have the same family name. You don't want to just say, I leave all my assets to my mother and father. You would rather just name them, their full name, and use their ID number or physical address, something that can differentiate them from another person of the same name out there. And yeah, just being clear and stating who the person is with their identification number would be advisable.
So, I mean, the thing is, a lot of these errors are actually, they seem obvious, but they're actually not. So people can inadvertently make little errors in drafting their will, which could have dramatic impact on the actual efficacy of their will in the event of their death.